consent, and I start the recording. So, in the ISA, as you already know, the ISA Square program is a program that supports the past 10 years, focus on interoperability, supporting the development of digital solutions, providing the aim is to provide interoperable solutions so that public administrations can benefit from those solutions. As a backbone of the unfortunately the ISA Square program finishes this years after 10 years of contribution and provision of solutions. ISA Square program has as a backbone the AIF, the interoperability framework, which consists of 4 layers: the legal, the organization, the semantic, and in technical interoperability layer, where for each of those layers several recommendations are given. The SEMIC program, as you already know, focuses on the semantic interoperability layer and tries to provide common definitions and specification, focusing on the semantic layer to member states and the solution. The aim or the focus of the SEMIC action is to identify existing data standards and as well as to create new specifications such as core vocabularies, ADMS, GeoDCAT-AP, and provide those specifications in order to be used at the European, national, as well as for at the local levels. In order to, apart from using existing data standards, SEMIC action tries to identify the needs for developing new common data models as it is a challenge nowadays with our involvement in the single digital gateway to identify which data models might be useful for the needs of the single digital gateway. So you may already are aware of one of the most popular actions of SEMIC action is to support the projects executed by the European Commission services, such as, for example, project services provided by the self-building block to promote semantic interoperability. SEMIC also investigates and tries to promote best practices, experiences, and lessons learned in the area of semantic interoperability, practices that are implemented by different by various member states, so that we can knowledge is shared and awareness is raised on semantic interoperability, as well as the appropriate metadata policy management policies. In order to perform all of this, SEMIC community, as well as all as a Square community, is organizing a number of events and try to engage as many stakeholders as possible to share knowledge and share knowledge in semantic interoperability. As you may know, one of the most common solutions of semantic interoperability are the vocabularies. Next slide, please. SEMIC implemented a number of solutions where the most well-known and established one are the core vocabularies, meaning the core person, business, core location, core criterion and evidence vocabulary, as well as public organization. One of the most commonly used and famous one is the GeoDCAT-AP vocabulary, which now focus is it at version 2, where an extension, a very related vocabulary to this is the GeoDCAT-AP vocabulary, which is an extension of DCAT-AP, which is the focus of our main of our webinar today, as well as the started DCAT-AP. Last but not least is the ADMS vocabulary. The ADMS vocabulary, which also acts as an umbrella to the rest of the others. And now I pass the floor to my colleague Bert van Nuffelen in order to talk about the GeoDCAT-AP working group.
Thank you, Pavlina. As you know, GeoDCAT-AP has a version 1.0 or 1.2 in line with the previous DCAT-AP. And since then, no working group has been called together. And this is actually the first call together of the new working group for GeoDCAT-AP to align with, of course, DCAT-AP 2.0. So that is our objective, to form with you and other experts that are not present today, a new community around GeoDCAT, and that we can build a new specification, improve it. And the first step is today, of course, to align with DCAT-AP and to become a new standard GeoDCAT-AP 2.0. This is our objective. In there, of course, we need your contribution, and we will do therefore a short introduction on our side. And on your side, we would like to have your name and affiliation in the chat, and as well an indication if you want to be listed as a contributor for the specification, so that we have a trace of that. We, of course, have past and contributors to the specification. We will see how we handle this, but we will make some recommendation and reference to them as well. So on my behalf, I'm Bert van Nuffelen. I'm as well editor for DCAT-AP today, and I actually support our main editor for GeoDCAT-AP, Andrea Perego, who is as well in the call, and who did the most of the work of presenting and creating this nice specification. Andrea, do you want to introduce shortly yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bert. So good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Perego, and as Bert was saying, I'm co-editor of the GeoDCAT specification, and currently I work as an external consultant at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission.
Thank you. And of course, we are supported with other team members like Florian and Alexandre. Okay, I hope you can, in the meantime, add your affiliation and name. So Alexandre will record it. So what I will do now is I will introduce and give you an overview of the editorial changes of GeoDCAT-AP, because the specification looks quite different than the previous GeoDCAT-AP 1.0 specification. And I will give a guidance to that so that you can read and that you can see what is in there, what is actually the same, and what is actually different, so that you have a guidance to it. And then I pass on the words to Andrea, who will go more in detail to the addressed issues to align with GeoDCAT-AP 2.0 and GeoDCAT itself 2.0. And in the end, we give a time frame, of course, where we, with the objective to land and to publish a new specification. Good. So first of all, GeoDCAT-AP 1.0 was mostly formulated as a transformation from the ISO Inspire specification towards DCAT-AP. And the focus in GeoDCAT-AP 1.0 was on this transformation and less on a specification in its own right. And this is one of the first main changes. If you read the specification, you will see that the specification GeoDCAT-AP 2.0 is now a specification in its own right. And it has the look and feel as GeoDCAT-AP. So in that sense, we have aligned the two approaches, and we have a new specification in there. Of course, in that alignment, Andrea did as well an effort to align with the upgrade to GeoDCAT 2.0, GeoDCAT-AP 2.0, because a lot of the issues that were addressed and challenges that were outstanding in GeoDCAT-AP 1.0 were actually addressed or covered now in the 2.0 versions. So we get an alignment with the two. So it's both a presentational update as an alignment to with the specification itself. And furthermore, of course, we will not forget about this mapping and this transformation. It's still a part, but it's kind of now turned into a reference implementation, how to transform the ISO Inspire metadata descriptions into the GeoDCAT-AP specification. And we hope that with this, of course, we get geospatial data even more and better published on the open data portals. Similarly, as the other working groups, we welcome comments and remarks on the specification in GitHub. So we have a specific GitHub for GeoDCAT-AP. There's an issue list, and you can write down your comments, as some of you already have done the past weeks. We will tag them with resolved in release 2.0, so the ones that we will address and really have addressed in 2.0. This might be that we sometimes create a new issue, because in tracks of issues there might be multiple issues, and then if there's not being resolved, we will create a new issue, and that will be open for the next release and next upgrade. Some of them might be a won't fix, might be an announcement or just a question for information or things like that. Then we will tag them as won't fix, and we will as well close them at the end of the process. So if you have early feedback, as already announced by Pavlina in the agenda overview, at the end, after Andrea and I have presented GeoDCAT AP 2.0, we have some moment that we can have already some feedback collection from your side. But the main interface will be GitHub. As you saw, we did as well an effort to create not only a PDF version as we used to do in for GeoDCAT-AP and the other core vocabularies, but we moved here towards the W3C style of an HTML document as the specification, human readable specification document, We hope in this way to have to address issues on editorial side much quicker and have a much better relationship with the specification in a more quicker and more agile way. Note that the specification on the mapping and so on is part and referenced in the specification and has its own GitHub repository too. What is part of the change and part of the specification, as already mentioned by Pavlina, GeoDCAT-AP is an extension of DCAT-AP, and DCAT-AP itself is an extension of DCAT. And that we made explicitly clear. And we want to, if you read or use GeoDCAT-AP, then you should as well understand and read DCAT-AP and understand and read DCAT. So if you do not know how things are to be handled, then you should look to the discussions or the sections in DCAT-AP first, and then in DCAT to find the guidance how to handle. And if that is, you don't find any way to handle it, then it might be a topic that we have to address specifically in the context of GeoDCAT-AP, or something, if it might be more general, we take it up and move it to DCAT-AP, or even suggest it to the DCAT community. So we try to find the right place where we can add and address the issues. To make things a bit more clear, there are tables and notes in the specification that will indicate things that are not present in DCAT-AP or in DCAT, so extensions, properties, classes that are taken into account, and this is, we try to make this visible in the specification. A short high-level tour of GeoDCAT-AP. So we created a UML style diagram to give you an overview, and I will use that one to give you a bit of a highlight on the things where you have to be aware that the specification is an extension of DCAT-AP. I colored the things here. I'll go one by one on the colorings as you know what I meant with it. So one is that, like in DCAT-AP, the properties are qualified according to optional, recommended, and mandatory. They extend DCAT-AP, so the mandatory will be mandatory, the recommended will be recommended, the optional and will be optional. But of course, GeoDCAT-AP adds some new properties and might make some properties more stricter, so moving from optional to recommended or from recommended to mandatory. So that are things that you can have a look at and assess if this is still valid and should be stay in this qualification. Then there are two aspects, and this is mostly for people that are not yet aware of, mostly aware of DCAT-AP, but not yet aware of GeoDCAT-AP. GeoDCAT-AP extends two classes quite heavily. That is the catalog records and the data service, with a lot of properties explicitly mentioning and placing them in the geospatial context. So whereas in DCAT-AP, both are a bit smaller and just are more open and wider, and maybe not have been discussed to full extent yet, certainly on the data service, since that was just recently added. GeoDCAT-AP has already based itself on the discussions that have happened in the Spire context, where the notion of a service already was present, and therefore there's a lot of agreements in the geospatial world that can have a place here. Finally, the picture, this is more an editorial note on the picture, is that the UML diagram is full of all boxes. Some of the classes are not pictured as boxes because otherwise it becomes so much that we can't read and follow the arrows. So I decided to shorten it and only keep the ones that are really key in the discussion so that we can have a kind of a highlighted view and a focused view on the specification. Of course, if we do an alignment with GeoDCAT-AP from specification GeoDCAT-AP 1.0, there might be changes that are backwards incompatible or that should be deprecated. And this means that we, here in this case, in GeoDCAT-AP, because there were choices already made, some things that were not present in DCAT-AP 1.0, 1.2, and GeoDCAT-AP has chosen and then already find a way, an agreement to handle it. But in the DCAT-AP 2.0, and there were some of the issues addressed that were present in GeoDCAT-AP 1.0, but they were chosen to resolve them in a different way. And GeoDCAT-AP will accommodate itself to that. Therefore, there will be deprecations. In the general specification, we have specifications about mandatory and optional recommended classes and properties, but there was no specification on what does it mean a deprecated class and a deprecated property. So to the GeoDCAT-AP community, you are the first core vocabulary community, semantic asset community working group that will see these definitions. And these are the ones we propose. If you have any comments on this, so what is a deprecated class and what is a deprecated property, and we should formulate it differently, please give feedback. So this is one of the changes and the additions that are new. The practical, of course, is that we have quite a number of deprecated classes and properties. And as you see, most of them have been a replacement and saying actually the information, the human readable words and class of property is not being removed, but the URI is being replaced by another URI. And you see where it happened. Some of them appeared and originated from DCAT-AP, which itself has deprecation inherited from DCAT. And some of them are based on the earlier decisions and the changes recommendations with regard to GeoDCAT-AP 1.0 and 2.0. Most of the things are very natural, but you have to be aware. Deprecation doesn't mean that at this moment it will be not correct. So you will not be violated to use them. But of course, we expect that data portals and harvesting portals might say you have to follow the 2.0 usages, and we don't read or we will not process the deprecated anymore. And as a side effect, your implementation has to change and to accommodate to these replacements. So we hope that this is kind of a natural process in the implementations. Now I give the word to Andrea, who will introduce you to the actual furthermore alignments and topics that are currently under discussion.
Okay, thanks, Bert. So now we are going to go through quickly about what we have at the moment in terms of issues, and then we will look into some supporting tools that are available, at least for the mappings defined in GeoDCAT-AP. So this table is basically taken from the issues available in GitHub. And what you can see here are the issues that are basically resolved. You can check all of them in GitHub, but basically there is already resolutions for some of them. For most of them, actually, were issues that were raised before releasing the new version of the specification. And we're just pointing out some changes to be done, looking at what was happening in the new version of the W3C data catalog vocabulary and then DCAT-AP 2.0. And in the few of them, instead, were more recent, but there has already been a discussion on GitHub, and based on the comments received so far, they're basically resolved. So for the pending issues, instead, we have a few of them to be addressed still. This is just the current list that we have, so saying that you are more than welcome to contribute your issues and also to contribute to discussions on these issues. And I say that also on these ones, most of them, the people that carried out the discussion came to a kind of resolution. But for some of them, probably since they are not so urgent, at least in terms of the scope of the current revision of GeoDCAT-AP, they may be postponed to a new version of the specification. And this relates in particular to the two issues listed at the top of the table, basically.
Okay.
Please, Bert.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so now I think we can solicitate a bit on your short early feedback, now having heard it, and then Andre will introduce some tooling that's available. I don't, wait, I have the chat open. Are there any chats? I don't know if anybody wants to give current feedback already. No, if not, then yeah, you're welcome to join and to discuss further on GitHub. Huh? Okay. Okay. Oh. Okay, I'll just do this. So our proposed timing is that today we are the 9th of November. If we look to all the things that are in the GitHub issue and we want to clean up here and there some editorial notes and add the contributors, etc., and do that cleanup, we aim for the 7th of December to have a publication of the new version, so GeoDCAT-AP 2.0, which is this editorial change plus the alignment to DCAT and DCAT-AP 2.0. And where we address as most as possible your remarks. And as Andrea mentioned, I will give him the assessment on that, whether or not this can be postponed or not, because he knows the geospatial context the best, that we can postpone some of them. And we continue with you to build up now this new specification in a lively manner, like we do in the DCAT-AP community. Any feedback? If there not, then Andrea.
We have a comment in the chat from Mantassa before going to Andrea.
Okay. Okay, good. Why is geo information tied to data sets and not to the model? Andrea?
Yes, may I ask Mantas if you can elaborate a bit your question?
Hi. So basically, my question is about I don't exactly understand why this temporal and geo information is tied to a data set, not to a single model or table, because one data set could contain multiple tables, and those multiple tables can contain different geographic areas or different temporal information. So maybe this.
Okay, so yeah. No, so look, I put your point. I'm trying to reply. Then you can tell me if I actually reply to your question. I think that probably what you're referring to. So when you mention table, you're probably referring to the notion that in GeoDCAT and also in GeoDCAT-AP and GeoDCAT-AP is what is called distribution. So is the actual data that are made available. And the data set is more an abstract entity that may have multiple distributions, so it can provide the data in multiple formats, but can also provide access to data in multiple ways, which means also with web services and also with different types of services. So if I understood correctly your point, I think that the part that you're talking about is something that is described in what is called distribution inside the model.
Yes, a distribution if this is only a single CSV file, but if data source is an API, so one distribution will be sort of one whole API containing multiple endpoints. Or in case of APIs, this new data service class describes it. So basically, yes, but what I'm just trying to tell that one data set can contain multiple distributions or even multiple data services, and those distributions and data services can cover different geographical areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah, this is supported actually in the specification. You can do that. Yeah.
Okay, so the distribution can describe different geographical areas. So this geographical coverage is not tied to dataset directly.
Yeah, to say that, I mean, this is a kind of a philosophical question in the sense that there is a lot of discussion in the community on whether when you have different spatial temporal coverage, you should create instead a new data set instead of multiple distributions. But is most cases is very much based on the data provider, on the use of the data and so on. So the specification by itself, GeoDCAT, GeoDCAT-AP, and GeoDCAT-AP, they all allow you to have multiple distributions with different coverages if you want. Although in some cases, some data providers instead are creating different data sets for them. But the specification is not preventing anyone from doing that.
Okay, thank you. Last question about services. So as I understand, distribution cannot or should not describe an API service. Is that correct?
Let's say that basically what has happened with the new version of WCC data catalog vocabulary is that in case you have a distribution available from a service then or API, then basically you can link the service from the distribution. So from the distribution, you say that actually this is not just a file to be downloaded, but is actually data available through a service API, and you can also specify the type of API. So you can say that it's a WMS, WFS, or Sparkle endpoint if you want, and you can also provide some additional information. And moreover, there is in a new class which is called data service, that is included in GeoDCAT-AP to the 0 and well in GeoDCAT-AP that can be used to provide some additional information. So the service in this case can either be described by itself as a record, irrespective whether it's linked to other data sets, but otherwise, in case you need to provide some more information about the service from the distribution, you can link to that service description.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's to add to this, there's a bit of it has connected with your previous question, because if you see what is a data set and what is then a distribution and what is then a data service, serving or providing services on that data. That's a kind of a connected network of information entities and so on. And there is in GeoDCAT-AP a GitHub issue called number 144, where this question was raised, and we're trying to provide an answer or a way of working that could work and we could align on. And that's, but okay, it has not been confirmed. It's open for discussion. And my vision, but this is my personal vision, is that we see a data set as a collection, a conceptual entity of data. Then the distribution is the full expression materialized in some form. And this has closed something that is kind of downloadable as a file. That download service is then still a distribution. But if you want to explore it in a more complex manner, where you need a more complex agent to interact with, typically, then you are more moving towards services. So you WFS services, etc., and file services are then real services offering access to that data. And then you have to see how close it maps or not. So then this is the game that we have to see how those things are formed together. I written some kind of line of thought, and I suggest you have a look to that, and we can have a discussion on that.
Okay, thank you.
Matthias has a question. Matthias, would you like to share it with us?
Yeah, sure. So I think that one of the problems when trying to implement GeoDCAT is to, and also to help others to implement it, is to understand how to express VMS and VFS services in a good way. And there are several aspects of this. One is that, well, what do you point to from the distribution? Should you use the get capabilities always? Or some other address? And I know that it would be very nice if it was possible to express some kind of template URIs, but as I understand, this is not the case. We don't have that at this point. We have only full URIs as access URL or download URL. And also I see the need to, in portals, for instance, indicate, in addition to formats, that something that is possible to access it via like an VFS service or VMS. And then, yeah, how do you describe this? Do you rely on the conforms to on the service level to somehow detect that, which is kind of indirectly? You get a listing of data sets and you see that this one is a, I don't know what format, like a CSV file, and then another one is a VMS. Well, it's not a format, it's actually a protocol. So I'm just talking from the perspective of portals that want to help users to find the right thing, and how should you then express it so it can be detected? Yeah, I know there are several questions hidden in this, but So my main question is, will there be any recommendation or guideline in the specification to clarify all of these things in addition to the examples?
I think beyond, we should go and well, there are two elements. First of all, what is the geospatial agreements that we have to look at, and what is the general approach? So, Matthias, I think part of the general approach might be that we have to lift this to GeoDCAT-AP alignments. Say, look for services. If you want to know what is the kind of service you're addressing, then we could rely on the conforms to and try to work around that. And then that would be a GeoDCAT-AP general umbrella where I see it to fit. If it then has to do specifically with the geospatial aspects, where we have these get capability services and so on, and where we could or suggest a much more uniform approach to say, okay, the get capabilities can be used as a distribution in this way. That we have to see if there is a need or not. Andrea, maybe you can answer from this perspective on that, if there is a need, or if it's open for the implementers to choose, and you see too much diversity in the current cases.
Yeah, so I think actually, I mean, this is the main point, the one that you raised, because the issues that Matthias were raising, in general, actually, they apply to all types of services and APIs. So also for Sparkle endpoints, there is the same issue. So I was going to specify the multiple formats available from a Sparkle endpoint, or which is the place, let's say, I should point to for a Sparkle endpoint to provide access to the interface description. So it is more or less the same. There may be some specific, very specific differences in details, but more or less the situation is the same. And actually, yeah, the point is that also the WC data catalog vocabulary, the new version, is not providing any guidance on that. So I think that maybe really worth to come up with an agreement that is not just specific to GeoDCAT-AP, but to GeoDCAT-AP and all the expansions, so to address the problem in a consistent way. So probably it may be worth putting this as one of the items in the agenda for a new version of the specifications.
Okay, but this indeed, I agree that we, at least at the level of GeoDCAT-AP as the umbrella, as the main, that we have to have this discussion and to give a big guidelines of a good guideline that where everybody can feel comfortable with, that we should address this. And that's one of the discussion points, maybe is again this issue that I had started there or commented on 144, which could be leading to an agreement somewhere, a guidance. But then, of course, we have to see how this facilitates this in the geospatial world. Maybe in this case, the geospatial world can be used as the check whether or not the agreements or the ideas around this is workable or not.
I think it would be very nice if you could take one step forward here, and since I think the geographical domain is the more complex one, so if it can be solved here, it maybe can inform the other areas. And I think there are at least 4 points. You want to know the URL to point to. You want to know whether I should repeat the distribution one per format. You want to know whether you should have the conforms to on both the distribution and the data service. And let's see now, should it be the same URL on the service as it is on the distribution. That's the thing I can think of immediately, at least.
Okay, yeah, there are indeed the concerns that I think worded in a different way in 144. So I think let's, if the community have some feedback, let's try to use that issue there to discuss it and then see where we can land.
Okay,
We'll
great, thanks.
I will put a specific GeoDCAT-AP issue to address this question and to point to this one on DCAT-AP, so that if you come from a GeoDCAT-AP perspective, then you can find this one too. Any other questions by other participants?
Hagar has a question about data service. Hagar, as well as, and then Laura. Hagar?
Yes, sorry, good morning. Yeah, not a specialized user of GeoDCAT, but I was wondering, I see also in DCAT-AP, it's not very clear how DCAT media type should be used. And I saw that one of the updated terms that you use now is DCT media type. And I was wondering if it wouldn't be more correct to use DCAT media type, which is basically file types from the ANA registry. I was wondering if that could be used to facilitate the description of service as distributions.
Well, so far the media type is in terms of the distribution, we point to it's used to indicate the format in which it is addressable from the download URL or the access URL. So that is connected to that. Will that be? It plays a role, but I don't know if this is in terms of services itself. It will be playing a more difficult role because I don't see it a lot of working, because in the service typically is kind of doing content negotiation and all kind of smart things. So media types do not mean a lot there, except that this is kind of the service description allowed values for the media types. In terms of the distributions, there it's if you restrict your perspective there to this is a downloadable file, then it makes sense. If it becomes a service, then it becomes always a bit of what do you mean with it? So that is a bit of the difficulty there. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to contribute more.
Yeah, no, I'm nothing in addition to what you said. Just one probably a very, very specific comment about the possible use of the IANA media types is that the reason why there's also the other property we are referring to other coolness is just because the IANA media type register is not including all the formats that are used. So just that basically. So this is also why, because originally this was created.
Is this clear, Hagar?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Then Laura?
Yes, my question is if there is any tool to verify that you are implementing right the specification, because once we do it, we have done it. I would like to know if it's correct or not. If we have some issue.
Okay. This brings us to the supporting tools partly. There are some supporting tools that Andrea will explain how you go from the ISA metadata, the ISO Inspire metadata to the GeoDCAT specification. I'll let him explain that. We can create, likewise, for DCAT-AP, shackle shapes for GeoDCAT-AP. This is possible to do, but then we should as well follow the line and discussions that we had in June on DCAT-AP on the shackle shapes, split, and so on, because there's a lot of subtlety on what is then conformant and not, and what we want to check and what we not. So this is a bit of the challenge then we have to align with each other. So that is what we have to do there. But then you can use those shapes to create an instance of the ISA testbed, for instance, shackle validator, where you can validate your resulting GeoDCAT-AP specification catalog with regards to the shackle shapes that you have chosen.
Okay.
Anna's comment is relevant to this, what you just said.
Yeah, indeed. So this is then something that we can address to create a more bigger space for all these possible cases where you can do different kind of validations levels.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments before start digging into supporting tools? Would you like to ask something? Yes, Anna, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch upon the issue which has already been discussed, but I just want to make sure we've understood the right recommendations. So as far as the default way to model different data from different geographical regions or time series for that matter, would, as far as DCAT is concerned, be to create different data sets rather than a number of distributions of the same data set. Now, as far as we understand, it is also the possibility of modeling these as distributions, but is this the recommended method, or is there a more of a guideline for how to do this the same way across borders, so that when the data is collected in the European data portal, that it's a more unison format? Are there any recommendations of whether to use one or the other, or is it simply application specific?
I think first, maybe Andrea, can you explain how this is currently in the Inspire alignment, what happens there? Because I think most of the geospatial data will be first specified according to the Inspire approach, and then of course mapped and used if we use this transformation that is on the slides. Then probably this is the current practice. It gives you an insight in current practice.
Maybe in addition, Bert, Florian speaking, I think, Anna, what you are asking is really valuable, and I think it would make sense if you could share the way you are doing it, because yeah, without looking at it right now, it's more difficult for us to say whether we recommend to do it this way or not. And also, I think we need to include the other people from the community in this conversation. So maybe what we could do is, if you share an example or a few examples of how you are doing it on your side, from there we could check also whether we have direct recommendations related to your examples. and also transparently share those with the rest of the community to see whether it makes sense at a EU level.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, but in addition, we have to be aware that, as what I've mentioned, is that the Inspire regulation and directive imposes a way of working. So that way of working will reflect in most of the geospatial GeoDCAT-AP catalogs.
Yeah, that's
So
correct.
if there is a particular way of modeling option chosen, and we would recommend another way in DCAT-AP, GeoDCAT-AP, then this will not match, because then the majority of the geospatial datasets will not follow that guideline. So we have to see how we can make the two worlds and see what is currently coming from there, what is the result, if that is widely different. So that the different implementers of the the Inspire directive have this freedom too. Then we maybe have to look as well with them how to align and to make that create a common recommendation across the both.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Can I make a comment here?
Yeah.
Matthias here.
Yeah. Yes.
I've written a few converters from CSW to DCAT for the GeoDCAT, for the Geo domain, and it's very hard to glean information from what you get from the CSW output, whether something is two distributions that are can be considered geographically complementary to each other or correspond to different formats of the same thing. I would say hard to impossible. So up to now, I basically just had to give up and make them into separate distributions, even though it would have been preferable to either make it into multiple data sets, into some kind of bigger data set series or geographical hold things together, or the way we do it in Sweden is to repeat the access URL or download URL if it is files, or potentially point to multiple data services. That could also be an option from the same distribution. There are many arguments back and forward where to go in here, and I think this is a bigger discussion that we need to have, whether it's time series or geographical distributed, divided data. I would say the same kind of approach should be taken.
Yeah, and as well, and this is something, from the perspective of the sharing of the information at the catalog level of the specification, we are quite agnostic about it. In the sense we can express it, all the information can be shared, even in different approaches of handling, they all can be merged and they become a coherent catalog. But of course, if you want to build an end user experience, a coherent end user experience based on these different approaches, that becomes more difficult. And that element, that last element, bringing that into the specification and as a kind of a guideline, that will be, that's the topic of discussion, of course.
Andrea, can you help us on this?
Point is that there are a lot of ways of saying the same thing inside the ISO metadata, and we must also take into account that the data model and what is considered as important in that world is not completely aligned with what we have in DCAT. So for the format, this is a very complicated issue, either to understand which format is specified. And this canon that is what you have inside these metadata fields, they're not only for the format, but for many other ones. Instead of having machine readable information, you have free text, and so you have to come up with some strategies not to deal with it. So it's more, let's say, on the implementation side. We can also well, one of the things to be said is that Inspire has been trying to promote some harmonized practices in preparing the metadata records, and this includes the increasing adoption of URIs also inside the ISO and Inspire records that are actually making things a bit easier. And lose all the implementation of the mapping rules for GeoDCAT-AP. I think that we have just to try to find a compromise in these cases because I mean, people can fill in ISO records in very different ways, and we need to live with that. So this can be just addressed at the implementation level. In some cases, you need to have transformation rules implemented is slightly different depending on the catalog that you are harvesting on the solutions. I think that's a very, very interesting lesson can be learned from the work done at European data support. I see that some members of the team of the European support are on the call. So I don't know if maybe worth having a meeting or webinar with them to see how they have been addressing this problem. But I think that this is a problem that we're going to have for quite a while. It cannot be solved so easily.
Any other question? Any other remark?
Just a remark that exactly what Andrea said, it would be very helpful if there would be, or SEMIC could organize a meeting between implementers or people doing the transfer of metadata from CSW to DCAT or GeoDCAT. That would be very helpful.
Okay. Thanks for the suggestion, Matthias.
Shall we continue to the supporting tools? And if anybody has a question, we can tackle this later. Andrea?
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's do that.
Okay, so just the few last slides is about the tools that are available for support to the implementation of GeoDCAT-AP. These tools are just for the mappings defined by GeoDCAT-AP to transform records from ISO and Inspire. So they are just focusing on that specific aspect and not the creation of GeoDCAT-AP records directly in RDF. These tools were already available while we had the first release of GeoDCAT-AP. So, and basically they correspond to, if you can go to the next slide, to the XSLT implementation of the mapping defined in GeoDCAT-AP and the API that can be used in order to test directly the XSLT without having you to install it. As done in the previous work on GeoDCAT-AP, the XSLT is kept aligned with the latest published version of the specification. So if you use it at the moment, you can basically already see the results as it would be by using the current working draft of the specification. And the API, there is an online demo available, so you can also use this one in case you have your CSW endpoint and you want to see how the result will look like from that. There are also other tools, but I think the important ones are these ones because, as I said, they are kept aligned with the latest published version of the specification, so you can already see a list if you want to transform your records from Inspire ISO 19115 to GeoDCAT-AP. which would be the result. And so you can test them. Also in this case, you are all very welcome to provide feedback on this implementation of the transformation rules. In case you see that there's anything that you get out of it is wrong or missing, not aligned with what is in the specification. So we will be able to fix bugs or possibly extend the transformation rules in order to address issues that have not been taken into account. And one of the things to be taken into account also by looking at it is that this is not, the style sheet or the transformation rules that is able to cope with all the possible use cases. So it is a very general one. It is meant to be general because it can be applied to different use cases. And of course, in case you would like to use it in your infrastructure, then they need to be customized. But at least it provides the consistent and harmonized way to transform XML records from Inspire and ISO into RDF.
Oh, what's that? No, that's no. Yeah. Okay. So we have arrived at the end of the meeting. I see that there's still some notes and topics. So Nikolai mentioned that for this last tool that Andrea presented, there is a Docker configuration now available in a pull request, and we will thank you for that work, and we'll take into account that at this. And then Matthias has as well some last question. Would it make sense to provide the inverse transformation as well? Andrea?
When GeoDCAT-AP was
Andrea, you broke off. Maybe
Can you hear me?
restart. Yeah, you can restart. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So what I was saying is that when GeoDCAT-AP was developed the first time, one of the decisions taken was that being able to transform from GeoDCAT-AP to ISO Inspire would be nice, but is not a requirement. At the moment, actually, considering how the mappings has been defined, the issue is that first of all, GeoDCAT-AP is not, of course, covering all what is in the Inspire and the ISO record. So converting it back may result in losing the transformation. But in case we have GeoDCAT-AP record RDF we want to be transformed into ISO, this might be possible, even though in some cases the mapping rules are not always one-to-one, but one-to-many. So some decisions should be taken in order to address these specific use cases. I think that is very much related to how much having this transformation from GeoDCAT to ISO is relevant. How many people would request it? Which use cases we have? But again, I mean, also for this specific topic, we can also rely on possible contributions, maybe already existing. If anybody has already implemented something in that direction, then maybe it can be shared, and then we can try to build upon that instead of building from scratch. But again, I mean, we need to have some evidence that this is a request needed for the GeoDCAT-AP community, I guess.
And in addition, there's a question to you, Andrea, from Hannes. Are there already implementations from this XSLT much more elaborated in CCAN or GeoNetwork? Are you aware of these things? Where these mappings have been
I know
integrated?
that there is a plan to implement the XSLT in GeoNetwork, and I know that the people involved in GeoNetwork were looking at the new version of the XSLT, and they have the plan to I don't know the timing for that. SICA, no, I don't think so. Also because they're not using XSLTs for doing this kind of job. They just map it by using the programming language that is behind it. So they're doing this in Python, I think. What I know is that in any case, at least a customized and extended version of the XSLT has already been implemented. I mean, by a long time for the European data portal. So the GeoHarvester of the European data portal uses basically transformations defined in GeoDCAT-AP, but the XSLT is far more extended and elaborated. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the plan is also to update it based on the new version of GeoDCAT-AP, but I don't know this.
Okay, so yeah, just reading the comments from Nikolai to Hannes. So the CCAN, you only do RDF harvesting with REST URLs. And then the feedback from Matthias to you, Andrea. He started to write a converter, but it was based on JavaScript rather than XSLT. And he invites to collaborate on that. And then there's a question from Mantas, which is more to alignment and expectations with regards to the, I think, implementation requirements and relationship with the European Data Portal, I think. So is there any deadline or requirement when National Data Portal should add support for GeoDCAT-AP 2.0? So here, the alignment will be in terms of with the EDP when they will accept or handle it in accordance. So they should accept DCAT-AP 2.0. So most of the time, they should be able to handle already GeoDCAT-AP, but maybe not showing or displaying all the properties that are being specified in GeoDCAT. But the base semantics and the base catalogs should be harvestable already by the European Data Portal. So on that side, the European Data Portal should find a way and say, okay, now we take some specifics from the GeoDCAT-AP, we visualize it, and we check and we request national portals to align on that.
Is there any of among the participants from that would like to contribute on this on coming from EDP? I guess not. Does anybody?
We'll reach out to them.
Yes, we will reach out to them. Does anybody want to contribute, or does anybody has additional questions that were not tackled so far? It seems that we covered everything and everything is clear. I don't know, Bert or Andrea, would you like to add something before closing the meeting?
I only want to thank Andrea for the hard work that you already did.
Thanks. No, nothing to add. Thank you.
From my side, I would like to thank everybody. First of all, Andrea, Bert, and the rest of the team for the work that they perform for the preparation of this new version. I would like to thank all of our participants for attending the meeting, and I would encourage them to put their comments and feedback to provide the feedback in the GitHub. We also take under consideration the very useful suggestion about the webinar with the tools and the transfer regarding tools and the transformation. We will try to put it on in the time plan so that we can schedule it accordingly, and we would all the links how to contribute, and we would like to thank all of you for attending the meeting. Have a very nice day. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.